Africa's local government landscape has certainly changed into a new era, with elections producing surprises in some instances. The IEC declared the elections free and fair. The electoral body said the ANC still dominated the country's 213 municipalities, having achieved a majority of 161 of them. The DA remains the main opposition with a majority in 13 municipalities. Here to unpack this further, I'm joined now by Monique Bennett, who is Senior Researcher at Good Governance Afrika, Dada Morero, ANC's Gauteng Regional Secretary, and Professor Sethulego, Matebisi, Political Analyst. Good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. I mean, by and large, if you look at the situation now, would you say that we are now going to move into a spirit of partnership and cooperation, collaboration and common purpose? Do all these parties who are coming together post-elections into coalitions have a sense of wanting to work together? Professor Matebisi, let's begin with you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, sir, and good evening to South Africans and to my fellow panelists. We are definitely moved to what I would call uncharted territory with our local governance. And we already had almost like a feeling or a template what to expect after the 2016 outcome of the local government election. But fact of the matter is it will all depend on the local representatives that have been chosen by the local councils, whether they will take over the baton from their predecessors and advance the interest of the residents or the communities. Local government is not about political ideologies. Local government is not about advancing the interest of individual leaders, but it is all about advancing the interest of communities and residents, as I've indicated. And one can just hope that some of the outcomes of these councils over the past few days will not come to haunt or once again lead to a chaotic situation at local government level.
Yeah. Dada, the rug literally has been pulled from under the feet of the ANC in the Gauteng province in all the major metros. Is the ANC ready to work hand in hand and co-govern together with other parties to eradicate poverty?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to the fellow panelists and to yourselves and the viewers. Certainly, the ANC has co-governed before. It's not a new thing. We're co-governing since 2019 in a coalition arrangement in Johannesburg. There's been also an arrangement of that nature in Ekurhuleni, in Mohali City, and so on. So we have been open to working with other parties as the ANC. And we also insisted on a negotiated agreements on minimum programs that all of us should achieve, which we did so in Gauteng and in Johannesburg in particular. And we agreed with all the 7 parties that we have worked with. So those are realities that the politics of today are beginning to dictate, especially in local government, formation of coalition partners to govern, because all of us claim to have an interest in as far as the success of the city and the growth of the city. So the ANC, where we stand, we are alive to the fact that coalitions are a reality, and we should continue to govern through coalitions unless we are able to master the majority of over 50%. But at this stage, we think any other options that are to ensure stability are important. We only get worried if we see that the marriage or the coalition partner that is in power may not last or may create instability in local government. Then we are more concerned that the options that we might have entered into may not be sustainable. If you look at the Johannesburg situation, We don't think that it's a sustainable situation, because the other one says it's a gift of votes, and the other says we never asked you for votes. So we may have a problem moving into 2022.
We're back with you tonight on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. Of course, it's breaking news. It's been the key story of the day, looking at developments in eThekwini now. There's a mayor there in place, inaugurated, wearing the chain and giving his first address and plans of what he will prioritize. Now, to unpack further what the effect of this will be on the political, democratic and party system going forward, we have Dada Morero, who is the Gauteng Regional Secretary for the ANC. We've got Professor Sethulego Matebisi, political analyst, as well as a senior researcher at Good Governance Africa, Monique Bennett. Monique, let me bring you in here. I mean, will now, as the mayor of eThekwini would like to think, all sectors of society feel represented by this particular administration, seeing that at least if the reports are anything to go by, we don't know exactly what the numbers were, but at least 20 other smaller parties voted along the ANC in that metro.
Thank you, Thabo. Thanks for having me, and welcome to your audience and your viewers. I definitely think it's a huge statement that South Africans have made in this election. The result is a huge shift in South African politics. I mean, a quarter of municipalities hung, which is huge. So I think the will of the people is hopefully being heard, and service delivery and all of these local municipality issues now need to be addressed and need to be confronted head on. And I hope the mayor's enthusiasm will be maintained over his 4-year tenure, hopefully. But it's a huge shift, and the people have spoken. They want services, and maybe this will enhance national unity, having a shared political power space in South Africa. Yeah,
I'll interrogate that a bit further. But do post-election coalitions in general, the ones that we have seen particularly happen in South Africa, the big one they always point to is the Government of National Unity, right, which came in '94. But of course, we've seen other smaller ones happening in local municipalities. Will they immediately see an equitable sharing of the resources?
I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, and I think there are ways in which these coalitions can ensure that the power sharing is as equal and as balanced as possible. I think one way would be to have written agreements set out at the beginning, so that all parties are represented, and there can be an understanding between parties on how to resolve issues if there are conflict of interests. And there should be mechanisms in place. So a written agreement would be a good place to start. And I think all parties need to be heard and need to be included in this process. And there needs to be constant dialogue. I think no one party should think that they can dominate the space necessarily. Obviously, there's indication that people's voices aren't being heard in the public, and the sentiment is we need our issues to be heard and be put into the forefront. So there needs to be compromise, and there needs to be a willingness to share power and have that power be equally distributed as much as possible. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Prof, but how effective are coalitions in fostering the unity that Monique would like to think this hopefully might bring, right? Because you've got a socially divided South Africa by and large, and you've got parties now, if you look at some of the coalitions that bring in people from conflicting backgrounds, some different ethnic groups, some different regional groups, some different religious backgrounds coming together. Does this foster a degree of national cohesion?
Well, perhaps just to answer your question, we should understand, whether we like it or not, coalition politics will be with us for the unforeseeable future. And one way or the other, we need to find or even chart our own way as to how are we going to navigate around what I would call uncharted territory. But fact of the matter is, we've seen what happened in Tshwane, although I foresee, some of the dangers about that, the role that the opposition played, and an opposition which is primarily concerned about, unseating the ANC. It's also dangerous for South Africa if that opposition bloc or so-called coalition, it's not focused on how are they going to deal with some of the issues or conflict or disagreements in future. And this is what happened during immediately after the 2016 elections. But at a national level, I think this is an opportune exciting times in South Africa. And one thing, and it's not because I want to patronize Dada here, is that something that we can be proud of, and people may say perhaps behind the back the ANC is trying hard, and will definitely fight come the next episodes of elections. But fact of the matter is, for the mere fact that the African National Congress also accepted the outcome of the elections, it's something that we should be proud. And I think it's these kind of messages that South Africans should embrace, that despite all our challenges, but we do have a political system where at the end of the day, the will of the people will be respected. And I strongly believe that it's still early days to see to what extent this coalition government or agreements will contribute to social cohesion and all that, but it serves a very good purpose, and that is to enhance the social fabric of communities. And by the way, remember the way how party structures operate. To a large extent, some of these decisions are taken at a national level. And I strongly believe that is why individual IFP members decided that we are going to take forward the local context, and their local context perhaps was not in synergy with the instruction that came from the IFP at national level, and that's why perhaps they voted against the instruction of their own party. And this is some of the things that will definitely play out in future. We should not assume that this is cut in stone. But fact of the matter is, at a broader level, I think it is definitely good for South Africa.
To arrange, one arrangement that particularly failed, and one attempted an arrangement that the ANC didn't go for. Dada Morero, I want you to respond to the IFP and the EFF attempt to form a coalition with the ANC, and whether or not, looking ahead to 2024, supporters of the ANC could punish you for not having the coalition, or punish you for having agreed with the IFP and then they turning on you. And of course, as a result of that, some of the occurrences that happened in eThekwini. We'll talk to those issues in a moment. In Focus tonight, and the conversation continues. I'm joined by Monique Bennett, Senior Researcher at Good Governance Africa, Dada Morero, ANC Gauteng Regional Secretary, and Professor Sethulego Matebisi, Political Analyst. Dada, looking ahead to 2024, do you think, some say, that your supporters as the ANC might punish you again for saying, well, the ANC did not want to get into a coalition with the EFF, for example, because the EFF was negotiating on the land expropriation ticket, to say, but that's an ANC resolution. Why wouldn't they bite on that? Or equally so, you insisting on fielding policy Kaunda in eThekwini, and that breaking the kind of arrangement that you had in place with the IFP. Do people say, well, things have really not changed here in this ANC?
Well, we have to confront the challenges of 2024, and part of the challenges is how to respond to issues of economic growth, which are quite critical, especially in a metropolitan city like where we are in Johannesburg. How do we grow the economy? How does Johannesburg contribute towards the economy of the country, so that we can see at least a 5% to 6% economic growth? Because once we are able to grow the economy, it will change the patterns, the voting patterns, because the poor of the poor will now have access to decent jobs. to decent housing, and to decent education and health. And once that happens, clearly it will change the voter thinking. The problem that we are faced with in communities now, post this election, is the issue around unemployment rate, which is quite high in communities, and our people do not see a reason why they should be going out to vote, as we are not being able for a long period of time to address and arrest this problem of unemployment. So that's one issue that the ANC will have to look at quite critical, set aside all other issues and focus on economic growth, which will result in job creation. So we need to focus quite clearly as the ANC, because now we know and are convinced that there's no relation between voter turnouts and service delivery, in a sense of the provision of electricity, water, working robots, roads, and so on and so on. So we are convinced that there's no relationship. I mean, the municipality of Johannesburg has been focused on service delivery in the last year, since 2019. Since we took over, there's been an aggressive program to ensure service delivery in disadvantaged communities, and of course, whilst maintaining services in affluent areas. Yeah. So that process has been done, and we've been committed. So I don't think the electorate will punish us in 2024 based on any other thing except issues around job creation and economic growth. The negotiations with the EFF did deadlock, and that's the report that we had. And of course, the EFF is an independent and autonomous organization that can make decisions as to who do they support and who do they go with. And the ANC has a responsibility as an organization to grow its electoral base, going back to its electoral base, grow it further, and ensure that we have the capacity and ability to bring our people out on the day of voting so that they can vote. We do know that the higher voter turnout results in the ANC winning elections, because it would have went out to vote, and as a result, the ANC would have won the city of Johannesburg quite comfortably, including Ekurhuleni and so on. But we have to deal with those issues on how to mobilize our people to go to the polls and vote.
But quick one,
so
Prof.
We do not think we're punished.
Yeah. Prof. Matebisi, a quick one. We've got in South Africa the floor crossing legislation. Now, due to this degree of fragmentation that we are seeing within our political system, are we likely to see a lot of that happening maybe later on in these coalition arrangements?
Yeah, well, that is still possible, but I think some of the challenges for the African National Congress will not be necessarily what happened now. For me, it will be, and perhaps a question that we should ask, it's what happened to the so-called powerful leagues within the African National Congress. And also, but what is very important for me is that it seems as if, although the African National Congress still has the alliance partners, the question is, what happened there? And these are the challenges going forward. And remember, for the ANC, they're still going to an elective conference. And the ANC, to a certain extent, is the only party for me in South Africa that is actually shooting itself in the foot each time. Every second day, there is some serious issues around the African National Congress. And it all depends going forward, how are they going to respond to that, to be able to fight. And remember also, it will be the first time that independents can contest the election. So all these issues will come to the fore going to the 2024 elections. And I've heard this several times before and even after the outcome of the elections, that lessons have been learned. But for me, the only way to demonstrate that lessons have been learned is when we see almost a complete overhaul of what I would call our dysfunctional municipalities. And that is the starting point. And the same applies for the Democratic Alliance. I mean, they are now leading almost like the economic hub of Africa. Major cities in South Africa, and I think there will also be huge responsibilities on how they are going to navigate this whole issue around dealing with parties like the EFF and all that. Definitely the issue of flow crossings and all that, that is still possible, but as I've indicated, we should also not rule out the possibility of individual council members just deciding against their own political party and even the civic organizations, members who are serving on councils, and to what extent will that once again affect the optimal functioning of local councils?
Monique, how will this impact on the party system in South Africa? There are two ways in which, of course, coalitions impact. It's either social cohesion or is the party system itself. Now, we've seen regional parties, so to speak, small parties like Action SA, now beginning to find relevance to a degree at a national level because of how they've been handling this matter of coalitions. Is that kind of pattern going to continue into 2024's national elections?
Thanks, Thabo. So I think we've kind of moved into a space of almost minority government, as some of my colleagues would refer to it at GGA. I think, as Prof alluded to, that this coalition landscape is yet to stay. South Africa being as naturally diverse as it is with religion, race, culture, language. I don't think that this is something that's going to go away by improving unemployment or improving, some of the things that Dada mentioned. I think what is critical is to get voters out there to vote. I think this election indicated that voter turnout is a serious issue, particularly among young people. So I think the IEC should be better funded in that sense. But I think that this kind of governance situation is going to stay, and I think parties and council members and politicians in general need to understand that compromise is an essential part of the relationship in their governance system. And as other examples have shown across the world, coalitions can work and can prove to be a healthy democratic governance system. And I think the vitality of South Africa's democracy is promising, and I'm positive, and I enjoyed Prof's statements on that as well. So that's my thoughts there.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Monique Bennett, Senior Researcher at Governance Africa, as well as Professor Sethulego, Matebisi, Political Analyst. We've got Gauteng Regional Secretary there, Dada Morero, with us.